Namaskar viewers, hello and welcome to Sansad TV. I am Teena Jha, you're watching Perspective. On the show today, we are going to talk about NATO's expansion. So after weeks of debate and deliberations, Finland and Sweden formally applied for membership of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization this week. Official applications were handed over by their ambassadors to NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, who hailed it as a historic moment. Also, US President Joe Biden called Finland and Sweden's decision to join NATO a watershed moment in European security. In a meeting with the Prime Minister of Sweden and the President of Finland on Thursday, Joe Biden said having two new NATO members in the High North will enhance the security of the alliance. Surprisingly, the Nordic nations' bid to join NATO faces stiff opposition, not from Russia, but one of the alliance members, Turkey. Without the support of all NATO members, Sweden and Finland cannot join the military alliance. So why is Turkey opposing the entry of the two Scandinavian countries into the alliance? How is Russia responding to NATO enlargement, something which it cited as provocative, leading to its invasion of Ukraine? Also, how will Sweden and Finland benefit from NATO membership, and the other way around? How will their entries into the alliance strengthen NATO? We'll be getting perspectives on some of these aspects and more on the program today from distinguished experts who are joining us virtually on the program. I'm pleased to welcome former Ambassador Prabhu Dayal, Mr. Manoj Joshi, Distinguished Fellow ORF, and Ms. Elisabeth Braw, Resident Fellow, American Enterprise Institute. She's joining us from Washington, D.C. Thank you to all my guests for your time, and thank you for joining us on the program today. Mr. Joshi, allow me to begin the program today with you. In fact, help us and our viewers understand what prompted Sweden and Finland to join NATO, abandoning their long history of neutrality?
Very simple. It was the invasion of Ukraine. Central European country was invaded. And these two countries in Northern Europe have been neutral for a long time, but they suddenly felt extremely insecure. Though they are capable, though they have substantial military forces of their own, but they realized they cannot deal with Russia, especially with Russia, which has decided to break all international rules by invading a UN member. So in those circumstances, they felt the rules of the game had changed, and they also needed to make a change.
Okay, Ms. Braw, before we get into responses from Turkey and Russia, let's also try and understand first, how will Sweden and Finland enhance NATO's capabilities, because of which they have taken the decision to abandon the history of neutrality and go towards NATO?
Was that a question for me?
Yes.
So Finland in particular has a phenomenal territorial defense expertise, and that is because it has, for all these years since the end of the Cold War, focused on territorial defense, whereas many other, in fact, most other NATO member states decided to focus on expeditionary warfare, Afghanistan, Iraq, other foreign assignments, because they thought land wars were over. Well, land wars are not over, as the world has discovered. And so Finland brings an extremely skilled military, and a military that has a small professional part, but an enormous reserve, which is also a great strength. It also has an excellent air force. Sweden has an excellent air force, a substantial navy with obviously the task of looking after a very long coastline, and also extremely good submarine capabilities that it has used, for example, to hunt suspected Russian submarines and Soviet submarines back in the day. So this is these are enormous assets. And on top of that, they bring a long tradition of what's called total defense, which is the involvement of all parts of society in keeping society safe, in keeping the country safe. So not just the armed forces, but civilians too, in various supporting roles. So they will be net contributors to NATO, not net beneficiaries.
All right, Ambassador, so it's a win-win situation for both. While both Sweden and Finland gain from becoming members of the NATO, the alliance also will be able to enhance its capabilities if both these countries become its members. Why then one of its own members, Turkey, is opposing their entry into this military alliance?
Well, first of all, as you pointed out in your introductory remarks, Turkey's approval is necessary because NATO makes its decisions about new members by consensus. Now, Turkey has traditionally been supportive of NATO enlargement. And it has argued that this enlargement would enhance European security. For example, it has argued in favor of Ukraine and Georgia joining NATO. Now, however, as regards Sweden and Finland, Turkey is opposing their NATO bid because it appears to me that Turkey wants to use these membership bids to extract some concessions and guarantees, not only from these two countries, but also from its NATO allies. Now, let me explain. Firstly, Turkey has grievances as it feels that Sweden and Finland have been extending support to Turkish opposition groups, such as the PKK or the Kurdistan Workers' Party, the leftist extremist group, the Revolutionary People's Liberation Front, and followers of the US-based Muslim cleric Fethullah Gulen, who Turkey has been alleging has been behind a failed military coup attempt in 2016. So Turkey also alleges that many Kurdish and other exiles have found a refuge in Sweden and Finland. And it feels that Sweden and Finland have refused to extradite people who are wanted by Turkey. So President Erdogan could now seek to negotiate a deal with which these two countries will crack down on the PKK and other groups in return for Turkey's support for their joining NATO. Secondly, I think Turkey also wants to use this issue of Sweden and Finland's membership to wrest concessions from the US and European countries. First of all, it wants CAATSA sanctions to be lifted by the US. Turkey wants to return to the US-led F-35 fighter jet program from which it was removed following its purchase of the Russian S-400 missile defense systems. Turkey also wants to purchase new F-16 fighter jets to upgrade its existing fleet. So because of such restrictions and also those by European countries, Turkey feels boxed in. For example, restrictions on sales of military equipment were imposed by European countries, including Sweden and Finland. Now, these were placed following Turkey's military incursion into northern Syria in 2019. Therefore, Turkey's demands could possibly include an end to the unofficial embargo on military sales to Turkey by European countries, as also concessions from EU countries concerning Turkey's own bid to join the European Union. This is a very significant point as far as Turkey is concerned. And it wants funds to help Turkey support millions of Syrian refugees whom it is accommodating. Well, at the same time, I think that Turkey is also trying to appease the Russians. It is well known that Turkish drones have helped the Ukrainians greatly. And it is trying to balance this military support given to Ukraine with some political support to Russia by trying to throw a spanner in the works of the bids by Sweden and Finland.
Okay.
Well, above all, I think there is also a domestic angle because Erdogan faces elections next June. His popularity is currently down, but he wants to have it raised by trying to appear the strong man, and therefore a standoff with Western nations over their support to the PKK could help Erdogan boost his support and rally the nationalist vote. So I think these are some of the factors which are behind the Turkish decision.
Okay, Ms. Braw, very quickly, if I could also, try and understand what then is the way ahead in the face of such kind of stiff opposition from Turkey and the fact that it is using it as a bargaining tool with these countries and with other NATO members. What is the way ahead? Are there any kind of talks to reach an agreement to actually get Turkey's support, which is vital for both countries to become a NATO member?
Well, in my view, Sweden and Finland's path to membership is
I'll come to you, Ambassador.
Let
me take the question to Ms. Braw.
All right, okay.
I think in the end, Sweden and Finland will be able to join. And as was just mentioned, Erdogan will get some concessions, I think specifically from the Americans who seem to be in talks already with his government. Erdogan has said that there is no point for Sweden and Finland to send our foreign ministers to Turkey. So clearly that's not going to be a productive path, but the Americans seem fairly confident that they can work something out. And unfortunately, Turkey has the weight on its side because we all want this to be a speedy process. But it could be possible, I think, to get Turkey back into the F-35 program or to get it those modernized F-16s that it wants. Sweden will be unwilling to make a lot of concessions, or it's in a very difficult situation because the one vote majority the minority government had in parliament happens to be an Iranian woman of a Kurdish woman of Iranian origin, born in Iran, who came to Sweden as a teenager, and she is very upset about Turkey's demands and has already said she is withdrawing her support from the government, who she feels is yielding to Turkey.
Mr. Joshi, let's now come to Russia's response. Very surprisingly, after some initial strong statements, Russia has now tried to downplay this entire development of Finland and Sweden applying for NATO membership. What do you think is behind Russia's, this kind of mild response, considering the fact that just a few months ago, a NATO membership for Ukraine had been termed provocative by Moscow, leading to such kind of invasion and a full-blown war that we are witnessing?
Well, I think very simply, they have realized that they have just scored a self-goal. I think once this awareness has gone in, what they're trying to do, and I think Sweden has also made it clear, and I think Finland has also made it clear that they are not interested in NATO bases or establishments in their country. Both of them have pretty strong defense systems, as Elisabeth pointed out. So they're not interested in additional defense material going there. So if the Russians, after having scored the self-goal, they need somehow they know that now there is no turning back. Whatever has happened has happened. I mean, the whole Ukraine war, the invasion, I don't think it's possible to turn the clock back. So much destruction has taken place. Millions of refugees have been created. So now what they're trying to do is to moderate that, because obviously initially Medvedev, for example, said we might station nuclear weapons on the border, we might do this, we might do that, and all kinds of threats were made. But I think the realization has come that, look, we've just scored a self-goal. I don't think Putin anticipated that, because you see, Putin's plan A in Ukraine was that they would very quickly overrun Ukraine. Ukraine would surrender and they would do the needful, and the deed would have been done. It would have been a coup de grace. But the problem is, it wasn't a coup de grace, and it is continuing, and it has given enough time for reflection in Finland and Sweden, and that reflection has led to this development. But there's no going back on this.
Okay.
And I think even Turkey is negotiating something. It would like to negotiate something. What it's negotiating really is the sense of its own security. In a sense, as a NATO member, you're supposed to also take care of your partner's security. And if your partner has PKK people who are designated terrorists in Sweden, then you have a problem. So definitely there will have to be some negotiation on that. Sweden will have to convince Turkey that they are not out to undermine Turkish security on that score. But as far as the Russians are concerned, they are now learning to live with the situation. And I think if they can minimize this by preventing NATO bases from arising, because what they have succeeded in doing is to double the area with which NATO borders Russia, in a very important area. And I think they have also I don't think the Russians have forgotten. There's also a deep Finnish grievance over the fact that Finland was forced to secede a large territory after the 1945 war. They were forced to give up their second largest city, Vyborg. See, So there are many old things that will come out in all this, and I think the Russians are trying to live the best they can with the situation.
Okay, let me go across to the ambassador and understand what he thinks about Russia's stance. Ambassador, do you think it's the prolonged war and the repercussions that it has had on Russian economy is something that is reflecting on the mild stance that we are witnessing from Moscow? In fact, we've heard statements both from the president as well as their foreign minister that a NATO membership for Finland and Sweden does not make any difference to Moscow. And I mean, it's very different from what we would have heard until a few months ago from Vladimir Putin.
Well, you're right. There is a sense of war weariness in Russia. But to me, the important question also is, how does this question of the membership of Sweden and Finland get resolved? Where is the compromise formula that everyone would like to have? Now, there will have to be some give and take. For one thing, the other NATO members will somehow have to make it clear to Turkey that by blocking the membership applications of Sweden and Finland, Turkey is hurting its own image amongst other NATO members. That its own status within NATO is getting undermined. And that it is going to be viewed as a country that it is blocking the expansion of NATO for its own ulterior motives. So first of all, this factor has to be somehow made very, very clear to Turkey. Then at the same time, there will have to be some meeting of Turkish demands. That is to say, what it wants vis-a-vis the Turkish rebels who are based out of Sweden and Finland, some sort of assurance or guarantee by these two countries who now want to become NATO members. These guarantees could go somewhere in assuaging Turkey. Then, of course, the more complicated question will be that relating to the CATSA sanctions and Turkey's keenness to become a part of the F-35 project again, because the US will not be so willing to readmit Turkey into its sort of program like the F-35 program when it has been sanctioned under CATSA. Lifting CATSA sanctions is not going to be so easy. So work will have to be done on all these fronts. The European countries might find it more easy to lift arms restrictions because in any case, what the Turks want is something more substantive and they want it out of the United States. Nonetheless, there will have to be give and take because otherwise, how do we proceed? The Russians at the moment are looking smugly because the Turks have blocked the membership. And even if the Russians say that the membership of Sweden and Finland does not bother them, the fact of the matter is they see that there are impediments and roadblocks to the membership of these two countries.
Absolutely. And to remove these hurdles, both sides have to, indulge in some kind of give and take, Ms. Braw, as the ambassador says. How much is the United States willing to concede to Turkey and on what conditions? The fact that the US president himself has described, applications by Finland and Sweden as a watershed moment in European security, to actually bring them on board and expand NATO, how much is the United States willing to compromise on?
I think there's a lot of willingness in the US for two reasons. First of all, NATO and by extension, the United States and indeed every other NATO member state would look pretty bad if this much lauded accession of Sweden and Finland to NATO, two hugely qualified countries, if it were to be not to happen because Turkey blocked it. So there's an enormous incentive in the US and other NATO member states and of course Sweden and Finland to strike some sort of deal to reach an agreement with Turkey to make it happen. As for what that could be, I think really the the fighter jets is the most promising avenue. And then, of course, the other reason is that if this much lauded accession doesn't happen, then Russia can conclude that NATO is not united, despite the fact that it has put on has demonstrated fantastic unity over the past few months, and the various NATO member states have supplied Ukraine with all kinds of defense equipment and, of course, money. If that were to be undermined because Turkey demonstrated to the whole world that NATO is not united, it would be terrible for the organization. So there's an enormous incentive to reach an agreement. And of course, Erdogan himself is keen to reach an agreement, because otherwise he will look like a fool who just demands and then has no leverage with his allies.
Absolutely. And also, Ms. Braw, if you could help us understand, usually what is the procedure? How long does it take for countries to gain NATO membership? And in this case, even if, the countries try to expedite, what is your estimate? How long could it take for both countries to come on board?
It depends on which country you are. For some countries, it has taken years. Sweden and Finland are in the fast lane, and let's exclude Turkey for a moment. Without Turkey, the process within NATO would take, within NATO headquarters, where ambassadors and civil servants within NATO headquarters do the administrative process, that would take a few weeks, and the decision would have to be ratified. The accession would have to be approved by every NATO government, and then ratified by every NATO parliament. So the ballpark estimate that most people seem to be counting on is 4 to 8 months, which is very speedy. But that, of course, is if Turkey does not slow it down. It's already slowing it down, because its ambassador blocked the first approval step this week at NATO headquarters. So we're already, in essence, being delayed. But 4 to 8 months would have been the case without Turkey. If Turkey now makes a quick turnaround, I think we can still count on early next year. If it decides to haggle, then all bets are off.
And by now, Mr. Joshi, maybe the Russia-Ukraine war is over. Looking at history, each time NATO enlargement takes place, Russia has not taken it lying down. Do you think once the war, the Russia-Ukraine war ends, Vladimir Putin could strike back? There could be repercussions for both these countries, just like what Ukraine is facing?
Well, I think, one reason, of course, is that Russia has a threat perception with regard to NATO. All of NATO's expansion, the arrogance with which the West expanded without explaining anything, without the whole process. And there were enough warnings. And that was done. It's got sort of fed into each other. So the Russian insecurity was enhanced, and they have reacted. But as I said, nothing justifies an invasion of another country, meaning nothing. So there's no, I'm not arguing that. But at the same time, when the war ends, Russia is going to be in a pretty bad position, pretty bad shape. We in India who have lived through, let's say, a war like 1965 war or 1971 war, we know the cost that you have to pay, an economic cost of the war, leave alone the human cost. There's an enormous human cost that you pay, but there's also an economic cost. So no matter, even now, the Russian economy may be looking good, but it's going to be affected. And the war has also shown up that many of Putin's military reforms, the military ideas that he put into place, they haven't quite worked. The Russian forces, turned out to be fairly inept, and the Russian equipment turned out to be not too good to deal with certain situations. So I don't think they're going to be in any shape to be taking on someone else after this experience. They would be busy trying to lick their wounds, I think, and the wounds will be pretty substantial. Finland and Sweden joining NATO will be just one part of the equation. Okay. There will be other aspects. The sanctions will still be there. Their economy will be in a pretty bad shape. So there will be many, many things which will compel them to focus their attention inward.
Okay, Ambassador, very quickly, one final comment from you, because all of this is having implications on geopolitics in Europe and, of course, the world. How do you see all of this impacting global security?
Well, first of all, let me state that I completely agree with Dr. Manoj Joshi when he says that Russia will look inwards, and therefore a question of it threatening Finland and Sweden in the foreseeable future does not arise. Russia has already had a jolt in regard to its invasion of Ukraine, and things didn't go as it had thought. And therefore, to me, it doesn't seem likely that it will be posing any serious threat to either Finland or Sweden. But that's a separate matter, of course. As regards your question relating to global security, global security has been considerably endangered. The world has woken up to the reality that a stronger neighbor can be tempted to attack a weaker one. How do I view things in our own context? We have a very adventurous neighbor in China, which works in tandem with another adventurous neighbor like Pakistan. They treat each other as all-weather friends. My fear is that some adventurism might encourage these two countries to try and see how they can promote their own interests, testing the waters, so to speak. Though, of course, going by the example of Ukraine, probably they would be realizing that things are not so easy to accomplish when it comes down to the actual battlefield. So, as far as global security is concerned, countries which try to wage war will be thinking twice about the outcome of such endeavors.
All right, so that having been said, I'll have to wrap up the discussion. Thank you once again to all my guests for joining me on the program today, sharing your thoughts, your views with us and our viewers. It was a pleasure having you on the program. So that's it from us on this edition of Perspective Today. Thanks very much to all our viewers as well for their time. See you again same time tomorrow with another topic and a fresh set of panelists as well. Until then, take good care of yourselves and keep watching Sansad TV.